look at it and it's like 1 Corinthians 7, and it's like, oh, the marriage chapter.
Yeah,
I know why.
There's a lot there. There's a lot there.
Long story short, though, I walk away from that kind of saying it sort of sounds like Paul sort of has almost a little bit of pity for you married folks. Like, it's like...
Well, I was going to say, that's one of the things that's always cracked me up, because in my premarital counseling, I always use Ephesians 5. And then I get to thinking, now this was written by a guy, marriage advice from a guy that's never been married. And I think he also, but he even says, there are people who would argue that he makes a good point of spiritual giftedness as being single. A spiritual gift is being single, because it's a different lifestyle. It's different that you can settle with. I'm not married, but for Paul, he considered himself, and he would almost encourage people, be like I am, single, because for Paul, he did. And this isn't a bad thing when I say this, but for Paul, he was not distracted by a family. He didn't have to worry about, you know what, if I go on this missionary journey, I might not come back. And if I might not come back, who's going to look after my kids? He didn't have to worry about that, because didn't have a wife, didn't have kids. And so he was able to more freely, totally abandon himself to God and what he wanted him to do. So I fully believe for Paul, it was almost a pity of, too bad you're married, because hey, I'm free to serve the Lord. And
that's exactly the way it read to me. And I've read 1 Corinthians 7, I'm sure, several times, because I know I've read enough and recognized enough of those verses. Mm-hmm. And I know me well enough to know I very rarely read just a verse. I usually read at least a chapter. So I've had to have read that chapter a dozen times. And honestly, every time I hear it, I hear the same thing, kind of what you just said. But I think there's got to be more to it than that, because I'm sure God's not telling us it's better to be single. But honestly, if I'm paraphrasing it, and I want you to tell me if I'm missing this, because I'm sure I'm overgeneralizing it a bit. But he kind of sounds like he's saying intergender relationships are annoying. Romantic relationships can be a lot of work. They can take away your energy from God. They can distract you, because it's very hard to not almost serve two masters there, right? You've got to serve God, but you've also got to serve your wife too, and you should serve your wife. Now, you get that balance right, and it's all right, but it's all in harmony. Right. But you upset it a little bit, and it becomes a big problem. And he kind of sounds like he's saying, if you can make it by yourself, that's better. And almost to the point where it's like, look, this stuff right here it's tempting, and you're going to want to do it.
Right.
You shouldn't, and it'd be better if you didn't. But if you are, at least stick to one, because you definitely don't want two or more.
That's right.
Well, look, I can't say anything less than that. Like that sounds kind of like my summary of relationships sometimes.
Well, and I think for Paul, and it's kind of interesting, because I just quoted Ephesians 5. This is the same guy who says, "Listen, if I had my brothers, I'd rather you be single, but I understand. Rather than burn in passion," or what he says there, I believe it's in lust, but or whatever the case may be. But getting married is fine. In fact, Ephesians 5 says the marriage between a man and woman is a picture of Christ and the church. So that's a beautiful picture. Mm-hmm. And God intended, when He created Adam and Eve in the garden, He ordained marriage as a good thing. So I think it's just one of. I think what Paul is saying there, and one of the things that, as you were talking, it just hit me that, we tend to make life about, and I know as little girls, they always look forward to their wedding day. Mm-hmm. We tend to make life about those things of, once we get there, okay, now we've accomplished that. And look, I'm all for, I can't wait for when my children get married. I can't wait for when they have children. But at the same time,
like a checkpoint or a check mark.
Yeah, and we look forward to those big events. But I believe Paul is saying, whether you're married or whether you're single, whether you're a successfully employed CEO, or whether you are, a barely employed, just hired yesterday entry person, be all that you can be for Christ. Mm-hmm. And sometimes, whether it's you're married or single, he's just trying to point out that, but being single has its advantages. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really a passage for folks that maybe have never been married, or maybe they find themselves single, of, hey, don't tie your hopes to, well, I got to have a spouse or I'm not going to be fulfilled in Christ.